My name is Ofelia Owens and I'm 34 years old. 3 weeks after I gave birth to my daughter, I stood in my own kitchen holding her against my shoulder while my mother told me to pack. Not asked. Told. My brother's family needed the house, she said, and I could find a rental, because I was strong, and they mattered more. She said it the way you'd read a bus schedule. There was one detail my family had managed to forget in all their planning, one line of print on one piece of paper filed at the county recorder's office. What my mother did to my daughter's nursery 2 weeks later still makes my hands cold, and what I finally said through the intercom that Sunday morning made her drop her phone on my front walk. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where the quiet ones in the family finally tell you the whole thing, start to finish, in their own steady voice. If stories about family, boundaries, and the price of finally saying no speak to you, drop a comment and subscribe. This one begins in a kitchen that belonged to me. Before that kitchen scene can mean anything, meet the girl who paid for the kitchen. So let me back up. I've been a NICU nurse in Dayton, Ohio for 12 years. Neonatal intensive care, the floor where babies the size of your hand fight for their lives and panic is a luxury we don't prescribe. I put myself through nursing school on loans and double shifts at a diner. Nobody in my family came to my pinning ceremony because my brother Brent had a baseball tournament that weekend, and in the Owens family, that's just how the math worked. I was the strong one. That was my title, my job description, and as I'd learn, my sentence. When Brent needed money for his wedding, the strong one loaned it, and we all quietly agreed. Loaned meant gave. When Dad died 2 years ago and Mom couldn't cover the apartment alone, the strong one had a spare bedroom, didn't she? When anything in that family broke, leaked, failed, or cried, the family passed it to me the way you pass a dish to the person standing closest to the sink. And here's the confession that matters, the one this whole story turns on. I liked it. Being needed was the only currency my family ever accepted from me, so I kept paying it, year after year, and told myself the invoice would eventually come back marked with love. My mother has said many things to me since March, but the truest sentence anyone ever said about me came from my friend Rosa in the hospital break room. She said, "Offie, you've been tipping people your whole life just for letting you sit at their table." It took a newborn and a moving truck to teach me she was right. The house came before the baby, and I want you to know exactly what it cost, because everyone in this story would later get very casual about that. 6 years ago, at 28, I signed for a 3-bedroom on Marigold Lane, a tired little colonial with a crooked maple and a porch that sagged like a kind old face. The down payment was night shifts. It was 6 years of Christmases worked so nurses with kids could stay home, every holiday differential, every extra weekend, a spreadsheet I kept like a prayer. My name went on the deed, my name went on the mortgage, and the first night I slept there, I lay on the floor of the empty living room because I had a house before I had a couch, and I felt something I'd never once felt at any Owens family table. Landed. Mine. My neighbor Miss D, 70 years old and sharp as a tack, brought over cornbread the second morning and said, "A woman who buys her own house learns who she is. Honey. Usually the hard way." I laughed. I didn't know she was reading me my future. 2 years ago, when Dad died, Mom moved into the downstairs bedroom and I never charged her a dime, never wanted to. But somewhere in those 2 years, a quiet renaming happened. At church, to her sisters, on the phone with Aunt Ruth, my house became the family house. Not Ophelia's house, the family house, as if it had been carried down a bloodline instead of carried out of my paychecks one exhausted night at a time. I noticed it. I even corrected it once or twice, gently, and got the little laugh, the wave of the hand. "You're so touchy about paperwork, Ofelia." Remember that phrase. My daughter Nora arrived on the 3rd of March, 3 weeks early, in a hurry, the way the best people often are. Her father and I had ended things back in my 5th month, quietly and for good, and I won't spend this story on him. He simply chose not to be in it. So it was me in the delivery room, and Rosa holding my hand, And then it was me and a 6-pound girl with her grandmother's stubborn chin, and I have never in my life been so terrified and so certain at the same time. Here's what people don't tell you about being a NICU nurse who becomes a mother. You know too much. You count breaths for fun, and you heal the same as everybody else, which is to say, slowly, bleeding, one-handed, on no sleep. I want to be fair about those first weeks. My mother helped. She cooked. She did laundry. She held Nora so I could shower. But help in Carol Owens's hands was never free. It was scaffolding, and scaffolding goes up around a thing so it can be worked on. She had opinions about formula, about the thermostat, about the nursery I'd painted the color of a June sky. I had learned years before how to hold a boundary with her. I'd had to. When she offered to manage my checking account after Nora came, I said no, warmly, twice. When she reorganized my kitchen, I put it back without a word. Small stuff, I told myself. Grief and grandbabies make people busy. Then, on a Tuesday morning in late March, my brother lost his house across town to the bank, and by that same afternoon, my mother had decided, without asking one question, whose house would fix it. She told me in my kitchen, which I keep saying on purpose, because she stood in it like it was hers. I was 3 weeks postpartum in a nursing tank and a robe, Nora asleep against my shoulder, warm as a loaf of bread. Mom set down her coffee, folded her hands, and made an announcement. Brent, Kayla, and the kids would be moving in the first week of May, as soon as the bank closed on their house. The children would take the upstairs rooms, meaning my room and the nursery. Brent and Kayla would need the downstairs. And I should start looking at rentals, something small, because, and I quote my own mother, "You're strong, Ofelia. You'll land on your feet. You always do." I actually laughed, one small stunned sound, because I thought, honest to God, that it was a joke. It was not a joke. I said, "Mom, this is my house." And my mother looked at me with the same tired patience she'd used on me my whole life, like I was a checkout girl disputing a coupon, and said the sentence I will hear in my head until I'm old. "Make room for your brother's family. They matter more." Right there, with my 3-week-old daughter breathing against my neck. Not "you've always managed." Not "it's temporary." None of the softeners she'd use later for the relatives. They matter more. The kitchen was so quiet I could hear the maple scratching the gutter. And I did what 34 years had trained me to do. Nothing. I stood there with my mouth full of numbers, the deed, the mortgage, 6 years of night shifts, and I swallowed all of it, because the strong one doesn't make scenes. My mother picked her coffee back up, satisfied, and said Kayla would come by Thursday to see the rooms. She thought silence meant what it had always meant from me. She was about to learn otherwise. I gave it one clean adult try. That night, after Nora's 10 o'clock feed, I came downstairs, sat across from my mother, and laid it out the way I'd give report at shift change. Calm, facts in order. This house is deeded to me. The mortgage is mine. Nobody is moving in, and nobody is moving out. Least of all, a newborn in April. I said Brent had my sympathy and, if he wanted it, my help finding a rental. I thought it was generous. I thought it was over. My mother listened with her head tilted, then delivered her whole philosophy in one line. "Paperwork doesn't make a family, Ofelia. Sacrifice does." Then she informed me that the arrangements were already made, as if reality were a casserole schedule, and went to bed in the room I'd given her for free. Here's the part that turned my stomach cold, though. Around midnight, I came down for water and heard her voice through her door, on the phone with Aunt Ruth, low and easy. And my mother was reciting details. Which weekend the truck was booked. Which church friends' sons would carry furniture. How the kids' beds would fit the nursery once the crib was down. The truck was booked. Everyone. Before she ever said a word to me in that kitchen. The announcement hadn't been a conversation that went wrong. It was a courtesy call. The next morning, Kayla added me to a group chat called Moving Day with a little truck emoji. 11 relatives already in it. A date already pinned. The first Sunday of May. I stood in my bathroom, running a thumb over my C-section scar, doing a kind of math no spreadsheet can hold. Then I called my brother, because some part of me still believed in him. Brent is 29, 5 years behind me, and I practically raised him through Mom's long shifts after Dad's first layoff, walked him to school, taught him to parallel park, co-signed nothing for him ever again after the wedding loan. I called him at lunch and kept my voice kind. I said, "Brent, I'm so sorry about the house. I know how scared you must be. And I need you to hear me directly, not through Mom. You can't move into my home. I will help you find a place. I'll even help with a deposit. But this house has a 3-week-old in it, and it's not available." There was a long pause, and in it I could hear Kayla's television in the background, and then my little brother said, in a voice I barely knew, "Mom already promised us Fee. The kids are excited about the yard." And when I said gently that it wasn't Mom's to promise, he sighed like I was the difficult one, like I was traffic, and said the family line, "You're the strong one. You'll be fine anywhere. It's different for us." I got off that phone and understood something with the specific clarity you get in triage. My brother was not going to save me, because my brother had never once had to save anyone. That had always been my shift. Aunt Ruth called an hour later, sugar-voiced, asking if I'd really let my nephews sleep in a shelter, which nobody was in danger of. Brent had 2 job offers and a severance. By supper, cousins I hadn't heard from in years knew a version of the story where I was hoarding a big empty house against homeless children. The family narrative machine was running, and I had spent my whole life feeding that machine my own explanations and watching it grind them into whatever shape Mom needed. So I stopped explaining. I went upstairs, opened the fireproof box in my closet, and read my own name on the deed, twice, under the lamp. I started reading everything after that. Nurses' unions are good for many things, and one of them is a legal helpline nobody uses until their life catches fire. I called it on my next feed and fold afternoon, Nora asleep on my chest, notepad on my knee, and a patient attorney named Miss Alvarez walked me through the landscape of my own home like a surveyor. "Ohio," she said. "Your mother has lived there 2 years, receives mail there, that makes her a resident, likely a tenant at will. You cannot change the locks on her. You cannot set her bags on the lawn, no matter whose name is on the deed. If you want her out, it's written notice, 30 days, delivered properly, then court if she stays. Do it clean, or it comes back on you." I wrote it all down like discharge instructions. Then she said the other half, the half that mattered more. "Your brother and his family are a different species entirely. They don't live there. They have never lived there. If they show up, they are guests, and a guest enters your home exactly as long as you allow it and not 1 minute longer. If they try to move in without your consent, that's not a family matter. That's trespass, and you can stand behind your locked door and call the non-emergency line with a clear conscience." I thanked her and sat for a while in the quiet, Nora's breath ticking against me like a small clock. My family had a truck, a group chat, 11 relatives, and a story where they were owed my home. I had a piece of paper and a process. Miss Alvarez had said one more thing before she hung up. "Your mother has rights, and so do you, hun. The only question in these cases is which of you is willing to actually use them." What came next wasn't shouting. Shouting I could have handled. I grew up on it. Worked emergency rooms. Shouting is weather. What came was warmer and much worse. The shame arrived in casseroles and scripture and voicemails that began with "Sweetheart." Aunt Ruth, twice a day, reminding me that family is all we have, that my mother buried a husband, that those babies of Brent's used to ask about their auntie. My mother's church friend Eileen, who I have met 3 times, calling to say she was praying for my heart to soften. Kayla posting in the group chat, a photo of her boys on an air mattress, caption, "Can't wait for the big yard. So blessed." Every message had the same architecture. Nobody argued I didn't own the house. Ownership was simply treated as a rude detail, the way you don't mention how the sausage gets made at a church breakfast. and the campaign leaned its whole weight on the oldest beam in my personality, the load-bearing one. Ofelia handles things. Ofelia doesn't make it worse. 12 years in a NICU teaches you a very particular discipline, though. When a situation deteriorates, you do not match its energy, you chart it. So I became a nurse about my own family. I saved every voicemail. I screenshotted the group chat, dated everything, kept a small spiral notebook by the coffee maker with times and quotes, not because a judge would ever care about Aunt Ruth's opinion of my heart, but because writing a thing down is how you stop it from rewriting you at 2 a.m. My hands wanted to explain, apologize, smooth. Instead, they documented. The strong one was still working the case, but for the first time in her life, the patient was herself. The Thursday visit told me how far ahead of me they already were. Kayla came to see the rooms, which I permitted, 10 civil minutes, because some part of me was still performing reasonable for the committee. She walked my upstairs with her phone out, taking photos of my bedroom, of the nursery, narrating closet space to Brent on speaker. At the door, leaving, she jingled her keys at me, little friendly wave, and on her ring, between a gym fob and a grocery tag, sat a brass key I recognized the way you recognize your own handwriting. My front door key. I asked, evenly, where she'd gotten it. "Oh, Mom Carol had copies made weeks ago," she said, breezy as a forecast. "For convenience. You know, for the transition." Weeks ago, I stood in my doorway doing quiet arithmetic while she drove off. Weeks ago was before the foreclosure was even final, which meant the plan predated the emergency, which meant the emergency was the excuse, not the cause. That night, the group chat buzzed on, and a message meant for a sister-in-law landed in the main thread by mistake. Kayla, to everyone, with a laughing emoji. Brent measured the little blue room last Tuesday. Crib won't fit both boys. It'll have to come down anyway. Last Tuesday. My brother had been inside my house with a tape measure in my daughter's nursery while I was at her pediatrician appointment, and my mother had let him in with a smile and never said a word to me. I looked at the brass key hook by my own door, at the neat row of spares I'd hung there like a trusting fool, and I felt the house shift around me. Not mine, apparently. Occupied. The only question left was the date. I tried my mother one more time, and I tried it honestly. Sunday evening, Nora asleep, the two of us at the kitchen table with tea, the same table where she'd made her announcement. I asked her the question I'd been swallowing since I was 9 years old. "Mom, when I was putting myself through school on diner shifts, where were you? When Dad died and I took you in, who else offered? I've been strong my whole life because there was never anyone standing behind me. So why is it that being strong only ever means I get less?" My mother looked at me for a long moment, and I watched something move behind her eyes, something old, and for 1 second I thought we might actually meet each other. Then it closed. "You're the strong one," she said, like it was tender, like it was a compliment being wasted on an ungrateful child. "Brent isn't built like you. He needs the ground held for him. You never did." There it was. The family religion, recited in my own kitchen. The strong one needs nothing. The strong one is a resource, not a relative. She reached across and patted my hand, and said something that would only make sense to me later, at the door, with a box in her arms. My mother said, "You think I don't know what it costs. I know better than you ever will." I didn't understand her yet. I was too tired, too sore, too busy being furious in my quiet way. But hold on to that sentence, the way I held on to it, because in a few weeks she would open it up for me like a locket, and inside it would be a farm in Pribble County and a girl I never met. Then the practical squeeze began, because shame alone wasn't closing the deal. My maternity leave had 5 weeks left on it, half paid. The mortgage didn't care. My emergency fund had survived the birth, but not by much. Single moms don't get to have a hospital bill. And my mother, who had been holding Nora every morning so I could sleep 1 merciful extra hour, suddenly got very busy. She had church, she had Ruth, she had a headache. "If I needed so much help," she observed, standing in my kitchen in her coat. Maybe I shouldn't be so eager to empty the house of family. There it was, the net being pulled up, slowly, so I could watch. She wasn't just declining to help, she was pricing it. Childcare, casseroles, a grandmother's arms at 3 a.m, all of it available again the moment I surrendered the keys. I want to be honest with you, because this is the part nobody says out loud. It almost worked. I was 6 weeks postpartum, underslept in a way that feels like being underwater, doing daycare math against a nurse's salary, and there was a version of the surrender that I could dress up as love. Family under one roof, cousins for Nora, my mother's hands back. All it would cost was everything I'd built and the last of whatever I was. What held the line wasn't courage, I'll tell you exactly what it was. It was Rosa, who started showing up Tuesdays and Fridays with groceries and no commentary, and Miss D, who took to sitting on her porch facing my driveway like a small knitting lighthouse. 2 women, neither of them blood, holding more of my weight than my entire family. I noticed who was actually carrying me. I wrote that down too. Nora's 6-week checkup fell on a Thursday morning. Perfect weight, strong lungs. The pediatrician called her a linebacker in a onesie, and for 1 full hour I was just a proud mother in a paper-curtained room. No group chat, no casseroles, no keys. We got home early, a little after 11. The garage door was open. My mother's car was in the drive, and Kayla's SUV was behind it, and I walked into my garage carrying my daughter in her car seat and stopped like I'd hit glass. My daughter's crib was in the garage, taken down, disassembled into white rails and slats, stacked neat as lumber against the paint cans. The mattress leaned beside it with the fitted sheet, clouds and little yellow moons still on it. Her mobile, the felt stars I'd hung while 9 months pregnant and crying at nothing, coiled in a hardware store bag on top. Inside, upstairs, I could hear my mother's voice in the blue room, bright and hostessy, telling Kayla where the boys' bunk beds would go once the wall had a fresh coat, something less babyish. They hadn't waited for the first of the month. They hadn't waited for me. My mother had taken apart my sleeping daughter's bed, in the house I owned, while I sat in a pediatrician's office being told my girl was thriving. I did not go upstairs. I stood in the cool of the garage, one hand on the car seat handle, and I put my other hand flat on the crib rail. White paint I had sanded myself in August, and the strangest calm came down over me, the triage calm, the one that arrives when the monitors go bad and there is no more room for feelings, only for the next correct action. I looked down at Nora, asleep, lashes like commas, and I whispered it, for the first time, just to her. This is my house. Here's what I did not do, and 12 years of night shifts get the credit. I did not scream. I did not carry the crib rails inside and make a scene for Kayla's phone camera, which, believe me, was hungry for one. A clip of unstable Ofelia would have fed that group chat for a year. I carried my daughter inside, past the blue room where my mother was mid-sentence about paint, and I said, pleasantly, "There's coffee in the pot," and went to my room and closed the door. And in that room, with Nora on my chest, I finally did the thing the strong one had never been allowed to do. I triaged my own family. Black tag, red tag, green tag. Who can be saved? Who is beyond it? Who is walking wounded? My brother, red tag, salvageable maybe, someday, in a different room of his life, but not by me, and not today. Aunt Ruth and the chorus, black tag gone. You don't spend compressions on people who were never breathing for you. And my mother, who I had loved with the specific desperate love of a daughter still auditioning at 34. I sat there a long time on that one. Then I looked at my sleeping daughter, 6 weeks old, who would one day be somebody's the strong one if I didn't break this thing, this heirloom, this rule the Owens women kept passing down the line like a christening gown soaked in something. And I tagged the audition, not the woman. The audition was over. I picked up my phone, and I did not text the group chat. I texted the locksmith whose magnet had been on my fridge for 6 years, and Miss Alvarez's extension, and Rosa. 3 messages, short ones, the kind you send when the plan is already whole. Let me stop here and ask you something. one tired woman to another. If you've ever been the strong one in your family, the one who handles it, tell me in the comments what it cost you, because I know I'm not the only one. And if this story is hitting somewhere real, subscribe and stay with me. The truck is coming. I made one final offer in writing because I wanted the record to show who tried. I texted Brent and copied Mom, calm as a discharge summary. I've found 3 rentals within 2 miles of the boys' school. I will pay your first 2 months' deposit myself tomorrow, as a gift. That's what I can do, and I can do it with love. What I cannot do is give you this house. Nora's home is not on the table. I attached the listings, actual links, actual square footage, a real bridge to a real solution, more than anyone had offered me in 34 years. Kayla replied with a thumbs down on the deposit offer, which told me everything about what this had ever been about, because people fleeing a housing emergency do not vote down 2 months free rent. They didn't want shelter. They wanted mine. Then my mother came upstairs and stood in my doorway with a face I'd never seen pointed at me before, the one she saved for waitresses who got the order wrong. "A deposit," she said. "You'd pay strangers' rent to keep your own blood out." "Family is not a lease agreement, Ofelia," I said quietly, that it wasn't the stranger's rent, it was Brent's, and that she was right. Family isn't a lease, because a lease gets honored. She didn't laugh. She straightened and issued her verdict, cold and final as a stamp. "They move in the first Sunday of May. Be reasonable and keep the small room. Or don't. That's your choice." Everything in this family, I noticed, was always my choice, right after they'd made it. She walked back downstairs. I sat on my bed, listening to my house not being mine, and I thought, all right, Sunday. Now we both have a date. That week brought the blow I still can't fully forgive, and it didn't come from my mother. Or maybe it did. I'll never prove it. Wednesday, 10 in the morning, a knock, and a polite woman with a lanyard and a clipboard on my porch. County Children's Services. Someone had called in a concern for infant welfare, citing an unstable living situation, a mother behaving erratically, possible postpartum crisis. She was kind and thorough, and she did her job, which is a sentence I can say now with my blood pressure intact. She saw a clean house, a full pantry, a thriving 6-week-old with a folder of pediatric records her mother could produce in 90 seconds because that mother charts things for a living. 20 minutes? Closed? Unfounded? Have a good day, ma'am. I shut the door and shook for 1 hour straight. Because understand what had just been attempted. Someone in my family, had aimed the machinery of the state at me, at my daughter, on a phone call, as a pressure tactic in a real estate dispute they were losing. In the group chat that afternoon, Aunt Ruth posted, unprompted, "Well, some people are clearly under too much strain to be making big decisions alone," and my mother replied with a praying hands emoji, and I sat with my notebook and wrote down the time. If there had been any road back, any Sunday dinner future where we all pretended spring never happened, it closed that Wednesday. They hadn't just tried to take the house. They'd tried, even just for 20 minutes, to reclassify me as a danger to the person I love most alive. You don't negotiate with that. You don't leave your flank open to it twice. Come Sunday, there would be nothing about me left unlocked. Thursday night, after the 10 o'clock feed, I sat at the kitchen table with 3 documents and did the quietest violence of my life. First, the notice. Miss Alvarez had walked me through it. 30 days. Written, dated, proper. To Carol Owens, you are hereby asked to vacate the premises at 414 Marigold Lane. My hand didn't shake until the signature, and then it did, and I let it, and signed anyway, and it occurred to me that some signatures end a marriage and some end a childhood, and mine was the second kind. I set it on the table where she takes her morning tea, next to the pot, because I am my mother's daughter and presentation matters. Second, the locksmith's card. Appointment held for the moment the law allowed it. not 1 hour before, because I was going to do every step of this clean enough to survive an audit by God himself. Third, the non-emergency number, saved to favorites, and a folder by the front door, deed, mortgage statement, notice copy, my ID, rubber banded like a go bag for a disaster you can hear coming up the street. Then I sat in my dark kitchen, in the house I bought at 28, and let myself grieve for exactly 1 pot of tea. Not for the house was safe now, or would be. For the version of my mother I had been inventing since I was a little girl, the one who was going to look up one day and see me, actually see me, and say, "You've done so much. Sit down, I'll carry it from here." I buried her that night at the kitchen table. The real one would find the paperwork at breakfast. Some locks, once changed, change you. I signed knowing that, and slept better than I had in weeks. My mother found the notice at 7:15 the next morning. I know because I was feeding Nora in the rocker upstairs, and the house went a very particular kind of silent, the silence of someone reading. I had braced for the eruption, and I want you to understand that what she did instead was so much more skillful. Nothing. No shout up the stairs, no torn paper. By the time I came down, she was at the counter in her good coat, suitcase packed, tea unpoured, the notice folded neatly beside the pot like an RSVP she was declining. She said, with the serenity of a saint on a holy card, "I won't stay where I'm not wanted. I'll be at Ruth's. When you come to your senses, you know the number." Then she kissed Nora on the head, not me, and wheeled her suitcase down my front walk with her spine straight as a fence post, pausing, and I swear this is true, to wave at Miss D's porch, ensuring a witness. It was masterful. She'd converted a legal notice she couldn't fight into a banishment she could perform. By noon, the family version was everywhere. Ofelia served her own widowed mother papers like a stranger, drove her out with a notice on the breakfast table, and the group chat lit with broken hearts. My phone buzzed all day like a hornet in a jar. Here's what I felt, and I'll be honest because I promised. Relief. First, God help me. The downstairs bedroom door standing open, the house breathing easier. Then grief. Then something almost like admiration, the bleak professional kind, one operator recognizing another. She'd left 12 days early to control the story. What she didn't know was that her leaving had just simplified mine. That evening, Miss D came across the yard with soup and sat in my kitchen like a small tribunal of one. She's 70, buried 2 husbands, raised 4 kids in that house of hers, and she doesn't do preamble. She said, "Your aunt called Darlene from the church about you, and Darlene called me. Want to know what they're saying?" I said not really, and she nodded, approving, and told me anyway, because information is ammunition, and she's generous with ammunition. Then she put her spoon down and delivered a small speech I intend to have framed. "Honey, I've watched you shovel that walk alone for 6 years. I watched you come home from night shift and mow at 7 in the morning, big as a house in July, because that grass wasn't going to cut itself. I never once saw a brother. I never once saw a moving truck full of help. I know whose house this is, and so does everybody on this street who has eyes. Let them talk in their group chat. The neighborhood has a group chat too, and you'd be surprised who's on it." I laughed for the first time in what felt like a month. A real one, ugly and loud, and Nora startled, and we both laughed harder. It mattered more than I can explain. Not because I needed a jury, but because shame dies in daylight, and Miss D was daylight with a soup pot. Before she left, she looked at my new deadbolt, at the folder by the door, and said the thing that stuck. "You've been asking permission your whole life from people who are never going to give it. Locks are just a way of no longer asking." Sunday, she said. She'd be on her porch early, knitting, watching. The locksmith came Saturday morning. My mother had left of her own accord, taken her things, announced her residence at Ruth's to the entire family, and texted me, in writing, "Don't wait on me. I don't live where I'm not wanted." Miss Alvarez confirmed it. Abandonment of the tenancy. Clean. Her rights ended when she surrendered them for the performance. So the locks changed. Front, back, garage. New brass, stiff and bright, and a video doorbell with an intercom speaker, which Rosa helped me install off a tutorial. 2 nurses with a drill, 1 baby monitor propped on the porch rail supervising. I dropped the old spare keys in a drawer. Useless now, little dead teeth. I did not feel triumphant. I want to be exact about this. Changing the locks on your childhood is not a victory lap. It's a tourniquet. You do it because the alternative is bleeding out. And it hurts the whole time it saves you. That afternoon, Brent texted. "We're coming Sunday to talk. All of us. Kayla's boxes are already in the truck, Fee. Don't make this ugly." I looked at that message a long time. My brother's version of diplomacy. Boxes already loaded. I typed and deleted several drafts of the old Ofelia, the explainer, the apologizer, the offerer of context and deposits. Then I sent what was true. "There's nothing to talk about at my house. The deposit offer stands through Friday. I love you. Don't come." He read it at 4:12 and didn't reply. That night I fed Nora at 2, at 5, and between feeds I lay awake listening to my house, my quiet, mine, and somewhere across town, a truck sat loaded pointing at us. She came back once before the end, my mother, alone, on Thursday, for the last box from the downstairs room. I could have left it on the porch. I didn't. I let her in, watched, because some appointments your heart insists on keeping. She got the box, and at the front door she stopped, and without me asking, standing in the doorway with cardboard in her arms, my mother finally opened the locket. "When I was 19, she said, my parents signed the farm over to your Uncle Walt. Preble County, 160 acres. I'd milked that parlor since I was 8. Walt was 17 and couldn't keep a tomato alive. But he was the boy, and the farm goes to the boy. That's what my mother told me in the kitchen, the same way you'd say rain's coming. She said, I stood there holding your Uncle Dale on my hip, because I was always holding somebody, and I watched them sign, and then I set the table for supper. Nobody made room for me either, Ofelia. I carried it. That's what women do. And for one long moment I saw her whole, 19 and strong and invisible, standing in a kitchen watching her inheritance walk to a boy who didn't want it, and my anger had to move over and make space for something worse, which is understanding. My mother wasn't the author of this. She was a page in it, and she'd spent 40 years insisting the sentence that broke her was grammar. I said softly, They were wrong, Mom, and you're doing it to me. She looked at me, adjusted the box on her hip, and said, It kept our family together, and walked to her car. The door closed. Both of them. Rosa came Friday with groceries and stayed to ask the only question that still needed asking. She unpacked oranges like it was her own kitchen and said, Okay, walk me through Sunday, and don't give me the nurse voice. So I laid out the price sheet, because I'd run it 100 times in the dark. If I held the line, I kept the house, and I likely lost my mother. Not for a season. Maybe for good. Women like Carol Owens do not forgive being survived. I'd be the villain at every funeral and wedding for a decade, the daughter who chose paperwork over people. Brent's boys would grow up on a story about mean Aunt Ofelia. And if I folded, I'd have my mother's hands back, and Sunday dinners, and the wide, warm lie of family under one roof, and the deed would still say Owens, just the wrong one eventually, and my daughter would inherit the christening gown, the one soaked in it. The strong ones rule. They matter more. Rosa listened, bagging the oranges into the bowl, and then she asked it. No nurse voice either. Someday Nora's going to hear this whole story, Fee, probably from you, in that kitchen right there. Which version do you want to be telling her? And there it was. Not whether I could survive being hated. I've been strong my whole life. I can survive anything. That was never the question. The question was, which story got told in this kitchen in 20 years, and who my daughter would learn to be while listening to it. Rent payer or homeowner. I picked up my phone, and I did not text anyone. I just checked the doorbell battery. Full. Good. Some prayers are just logistics said, kneeling. Before Sunday comes, I want your honest answer, not the polite one. Standing in my kitchen, mother on one side, deed on the other. Would you have opened that door? Tell me in the comments. Truly, no judgment. Some of you have carried exactly this. And if you're new here, subscribe. The truck arrives in the morning. Saturday night, after the 10 o'clock feed, I couldn't sleep. And for once, it wasn't dread. It was inventory. The body walking the halls counting what it loves. So at 2 in the morning, I did the thing I'd been saying.